Hello, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Kristen Noel, founder of the Intuitive Divorce, a coaching program that helps mamas save time, money, and heartache for themselves and their kids and divorce differently. And this work is an absolute labor of love for me. I'm a divorce survivor who once stood where you stand, and nothing gives me more pleasure than to walk beside other women and help them avoid the unnecessary pitfalls of the process and instead heal and get the outcomes they desire. I'm popping in here with my fabulous team member and boundary badass, wise and wonderfully talented coaching partner, Joe Young. We just finished a class in our inner circle coaching group where we regularly dive into the weeds of divorce, all the feelings and experiences that pop up in between court dates, filings, and decisions. And trust me, it's a lot. And we're
Yeah,
here to
there's no
remind you,
lack of content.
that's for sure. But we're here to remind you that it's also an opportunity to heal and navigate differently. That's what we get really excited about.
Mm.
Speaking of weeds, today we tackled the biggie, triggers. It's a topic that's coming up for so many women, no matter what stage they're at in their divorce. When we're triggered, it's like being tangled in a jungle of weeds that wrap themselves around us, pull us down, keep us stuck somewhere we don't want to be. So let's untangle ourselves. Joe, this is probably a good place to start. You had some amazingly juicy wisdom nuggets today in class. So where do we even begin?
Oh, I think the best place to begin is to recognize that to be triggered is to be human. Like the first place is to normalize it and to go, you know what, we're not going to exist in this 3D world of ours and not be triggered. And then you go from there. I mean, there's practical steps of, how do we first of all recognize that we're triggered? That's the first step. That's the first step in so much of what we teach, Kristen, is we say recognize it. If you realize that in the moment you're being triggered, it means that you're ready to see something,
Mm-hmm.
that you're ready to learn something. And I loved the topic today because we helped these mamas reframe triggers to teachers.
Mm-hmm. Pick the words right out of my mouth. Yep. Well, number one, that immediately interrupts. It interrupts the spiral down, right? Because, look, nobody wants to be triggered. Nobody likes being triggered. Divorce is a treasure trove of triggers. So it's so easy to get caught into that and then spiral down and say the regrettable words, to do the things we don't really want to do, show up in ways we don't want to show up, and then have a mess to clean up. And certainly don't need that on top of everything else that's going on in divorce. But we get triggered. And it's like, so what we really work with our mamas to do is give them tools and strategies and tips to interrupt what's happening. There's a big distinction between interrupting and acknowledging and being aware from shoving aside, fixing, pretending that it's not happening.
Yeah,
We're
we
shaming
talked
it,
today about
right?
bypassing.
Right,
We
right.
can so often think that we can think ourselves out of our triggers, that we
Mm-hmm.
can, for lack of a better word, kind of use a psychology of sorts to tell us, hey, I was triggered by this. I know I shouldn't feel that way. There's so many people who have it worse than me. There's any number of things that we can use to bypass. And at the end of the day, it's so important not to bypass what comes up, but to use it to your
Mm-hmm.
advantage. Again, it wouldn't be coming up if there weren't something in it for you.
Right, right. The
And
nugget, right?
so,
And
yep,
that's
yep,
and the big thing is also not judging it, right?
yes.
Not judging it. So it's like you go ahead and judge it. You can feel guilt about it. You can try to hide it. You can pretend it's not there, but it doesn't make it go away.
Yeah,
So oh my God, it was such a powerful class. That's why
so
I actually
powerful.
love diving in here afterwards because it's so fresh. My head and my heart, just, you know, all over the place. Powerful, powerful shares. Divorcing differently is really about seizing the opportunity to heal what needs to be healed. right? And to get in and
Yes.
see what's coming up and acknowledge in the awareness. Now, granted, we want to save time, money, and heartache. And we want to still show up for our work and for our children and for our lives and for our future. But in order to do that, we've got to like really be present with what is happening. And when we can learn to trust that it's happening for a reason, forget, oh, I wish, how could I not have seen this before? How could I have married this person? How could I, la, 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 la. We've all got like, we've got a whole story that, that we carry. Oh, I would love for you to speak
Yes.
about the story. This is the big piece. So this is, when Joe brought this in today, this was really powerful. So I'm going to let you dive into that.
Yeah. So, being able to share with our mamas that, we are all in story, all of us. And the concept is to recognize it as being story. And what does that mean? We can, let's just stick with triggers for a moment. So we can feel a trigger and it can remind us of all these things that have happened in the past, right? Especially in the middle of divorce. It's like, of course he didn't do X, Y, and Z, or of course he didn't take responsibility. And we automatically go to all these past experiences. And that keeps us stuck in story of why things can't be different, and we reinforce that all
And
the
can I
time
interrupt
with
you for
our
1 second?
thoughts. Yeah.
Also, when we were doing this today, we were, speaking of interrupting, we were literally interrupting our mamas as someone was speaking and they would bring up a trigger and they'd start telling a story. And this is a story that they told over and over and over again. And then we look for the evidence to support the story. So we keep the story alive. Thus, we keep the trigger alive.
Yes, because our stories affirm. They either affirm the old programming, the old story, the way that it's always been, or they affirm that we can make new choices, make different decisions. So the stories we tell ourselves are so important. And it's not just what we say, it is also what we think. What is that story that's running on repeat all the time in the back of your mind?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to be mindful of that and to go, wait a minute, I don't have to believe that story anymore. I do have a choice. I have a choice about, can I change this to something that feels better, something that is more empowering? And, we gave our mamas great tools today to be able to do that.
You're reading
And
my
and
mind.
that was just the
Mm-hmm.
best. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
really digging in with them and seeing what stories they have in common, seeing what may be unique to each of them. And I love what you said about not getting into the weeds, not getting into, the details of the story, because at the end of the day, what matters is how it's impacting you.
Mm-hmm.
It's how is it making you feel? The details
Mm-hmm.
aren't that important at the end of the day. It's how is it impacting you and what can you do with it that it can change
That's
that?
the key. What can you do with it? So we will get triggered. We definitely will get triggered.
Yes.
But what if, and this is again, not rainbows and unicorns because nobody likes to be triggered, but what if we stop and we interrupt in that second? We know when we're triggered. And in that second, we pull ourselves out of the ensuing chaos that we're about to participate in. And we say, what is it here to teach me? What am I meant to see? What can I do differently? Now, it doesn't mean you're going to have all the answers to solve the problem or the bigger problem, but you're not going to create more chaos. So if you interrupt, we gave a couple of examples of how we interrupt, how we step out of it. And like I said, doesn't mean you have a solution, but it means you don't create more problems,
And it
right?
means that you respond to it differently
Mm-hmm.
from a cleaner, safer, more intentional
Mm-hmm.
place.
Mm-hmm.
Our response can be so different when we take a moment and take ourselves through the steps of what we can do with our triggers. And I love that we got to share that today. So powerful.
Which was, it was so amazing. And there's a lot, and listen, there's a lot that comes up. A lot of women were getting triggered by how their spouses were behaving in the divorce and the things they were saying in court documents and the attacks that they were launching and how they were trying to the things that they had their lawyers putting in documents. And essentially, what it triggers is an emotion, is a feeling, which is, how could he say those things about me? How could the man that I married do this to me? It's the wound that's speaking.
It sure is. And it's really important to recognize it as that so that you can take a moment and feel those feelings
Mm-hmm.
and allow yourself to release the hurt, not to push it down, not to bypass it, not to try to skirt around it because it's just going to get louder, but to allow yourself to go, I'm human. And of course, I'm hurt in this situation. Now, how do I use that hurt going forward to empower myself to recognize that it doesn't matter what anybody else says. What I think of me is the most important thing. How I feel I'm doing as a mom, as a wife, as a friend, all of those things are ultimately what matter. But we can't get there without first going through feeling the feelings and making them safe and arriving at this new place to make intentional, forward moving choices. The other thing we talked about today that I loved was this idea about the have to, because we all get stuck in our stories of what we have to do.
Oh, I
And
loved
it
when
was
you said
like
that.
reminding the mamas, if they simply change the word to choose, what would you do differently?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than I have to keep the peace, what if you could reframe it to, you know what? It's not really true. I'm choosing to play the peacekeeper here. How does that feel different?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So many good nuggets today, Kristen, to help our mamas, not avoid triggers because there's no such thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing in divorce, certainly no such thing in life. We're
Mm-hmm.
going to be faced with them, but what do we do with them?
Right. And it's really just about how we're approaching it. And we feel so disempowered, especially in a situation like divorce, where there's this period of time, the messy middle, where everything feels vulnerable because everything is uncertain and nothing is settled and we don't really know how it's going to pan out. So, what do we do in that space? It's very easy to get triggered. I also love how we were constantly bringing in, if there's a triggering conversation, what can you do with it? Like practical tools, like, well, one, you could shut that conversation down. You could set a boundary. You could realize after that conversation, this isn't healthy for me. This doesn't lead to anywhere good for me, for my nervous system. So I'm no longer available for that. I'm no
Yes.
longer available for these conversations. I mean, you have to start putting protection in place and boundaries in place and seeing the need that's unmet. What can I do to feel empowered in this state of disempowerment? And remember, it's temporary. It is temporary, but it doesn't have to be a living hell.
Yeah. And how we think about it and how we process it and how we respond to the triggers makes all the difference in the world because
Mm-hmm.
that's what shifts our experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's what shifts our feeling about how we're navigating things, whether it's divorce or life.
I really love how we talked a lot. You always bring in the body and the nervous system. And when you said, like, ask yourself, where do I feel the trigger in my body?
Yeah.
Right? Where do I feel the trigger in my body? And how do I get my body back to safety?
Yeah. Because when our bodies are safe, that's when we can make
Mm-hmm.
those intentional choices. That's where we
Mm-hmm.
can respond from an empowered place rather than reacting out of fear
Mm-hmm.
or hurt or whatever the emotion may be. If we can bring our body and our nervous system back to safety, we can make really beautiful, empowering choices for ourselves. And it doesn't mean that the trigger goes away. It means that we get to choose how we respond to it differently.
Mm-hmm. I wrote down something beautiful that you said, which was asking yourself, what new choice can you affirm so you don't stay in the reaction of the trigger?
Yeah. Again, we're always reaffirming our stories. We're
Mm-hmm.
always affirming our stories.
Mm-hmm.
And, we can either do that by thinking of, like I said, all the old stuff, or we can make a different choice and decide that we're going to affirm, hey, I'm worth it. Hey, I'm doing a great job. Hey, you know
Mhm.
what? I'm actually killing it today. I didn't do everything perfectly, but man, I did this one thing really well. Or man, I had a great conversation with my child today that I
Mhm.
never thought possible.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, what we affirm is so important.
Well, I'm really glad you're bringing that in also because that's another thing that we as women, we tend to bypass. Where are we doing things right?
Yeah.
Where can we collect the little wins? Because right now in divorce, you need to collect as many little wins as you can. And when we interrupted stories today, and when we started to just reaffirm all the things that so many of these beautiful mamas had done right, it's like, I was like, whoa, 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 do not bypass that. Having that conversation with your child, being able to show up and being able to unpack that with your child is huge, is huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's
And you
so,
could feel the whole energy of the group shift in those moments
right.
where it was like, oh, yeah, wait, I am already doing that. And it's
Mhm.
like, yes, mama, take every opportunity you can to affirm that for yourself. Because, like you said in class, we're building that muscle. We're
Mhm.
building the muscle of how to show up differently, how to be there for ourselves differently, how to love ourselves differently. And when we do that, we get to spread that with everybody else
Mhm.
around us.
And this is why this work, love this work so
Me
much. I always
too.
say work, right? But I love this work so much because to feel triggered is to be human, right? But it's how we approach it, what we do with it. These are not just divorce skills. These are life skills. And the most incredible thing is that I know, and I'm seeing it, you're seeing it, like we're seeing it in real time. The women that are healing these pieces and parts of themselves are going to be forever transformed and changed. And they will
Yes.
never be in the place that they're in right now. This
And
is
when
where we,
they change, they're changing generations to come. That's the legacy of the work, quote unquote, work that we do.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
nothing like it.
Absolutely. I don't know. It was just it was a very, very powerful class. And I was just really grateful to share that with you and to be able to pop on here and to share it with all of you. So, okay, mamas, that's it for today. Joe and I are committed to popping in here each week, right after class, when all the wisdom nuggets are hot off the presses and ready to share. Let's get more active here together. And if there's something you're struggling with, leave it in the comment below. And maybe we can dive into your topic too. You can learn more about our work over at intuitivedivorce.com and make sure you're on a newsletter list, which you can join from the website. We send out lots of great info each week that will guide you through your divorce, dealing with your kids, your money, your emotions, and best yet, your healing. And if you're ready, you can also book a free strategy call with us. You do not have to do this alone, Mama.
Uh-uh. No, there's power in community, and this community is amazing. So
And you
we
are
look
amazing.
forward to next week. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your beautiful heart with us.